Lisa here. Welcome to my channel, or welcome back to my channel, and welcome to anti-haul number 15. Hello, if you are new to my anti-hauls, let me tell you a little bit about how they work. Essentially, in this video series, I like to share with you the decks I'm not keeping, the decks I decided not to pre-order, back on Kickstarter, or buy. I'm going to talk about mass market, indie decks, and obviously crowdfunded decks. And what I like to do is not just talk about the things I didn't buy or told myself no about, although that is the main focus of the video, but I also like to tell you what I decided would fill that gap from my own collection. And I'll be honest, in today's video, there are definitely a couple where I don't actually have something to fill the gap from my own collection, but I also kind of realized that was okay. You'll definitely hear more about that when I get to those decks. Now, I like to focus on, for me, keeping a collection that feels usable, that doesn't feel like I've got things that are just sitting around that I have no desire to use. I also like to sort of keep sort of niches of decks sort of small for the most part. I have a couple weakness areas, but for the most part, I like to keep just a couple decks in every sort of niche. So you'll find that a lot of times when I'm talking about my anti-hauls or I'm talking about my this or that declutter series, what I'm really doing is sort of saying, I want decks that will work for me, and I definitely don't want to end up with decks that just feel like clutter. So that's my main goal with this video and my other sort of mindful curating, mindful decluttering kind of things. If you are into tarot and oracle, especially if you enjoy variety of decks and you enjoy bringing things in, but you also want to be mindful and really curate carefully, then my content's probably a really good fit for you, and I definitely invite you to subscribe and hang out with me here. I really enjoy making videos. I make a lot of videos, come at tarot from a lot of different creative directions, and so we have a lot of fun here. Now, with that said, I'm going to jump off today's video, starting first with the decks I'm not keeping. And while I'm not sharing every single deck that I have recently decluttered, some of those are shared in other videos or in my this or that series, today I want to talk about a few things I decided are going to be leaving eventually, and a little bit about why I'm not keeping them and sort of what serves the need that I feel like these decks maybe would have filled for me. So the first one I want to talk about in this area is, oh man, the ones I'm focusing on here are all ones that I'm particularly gutted didn't work out. So I don't even know where to, I'm just going to start. We're fine. We're fine here. It's going to be okay. It's going to be all right. This first one, I have a bit of a story. So this video is probably going to be long, by the way, if you're new to my channel. I make long videos. Yeah, so if you like putting on content, just like hanging out and getting some stuff done, I'm probably your girl. But anyway, so the first one I want to talk about is actually, oh my God, I don't even know if I can bring myself to say this out loud. It's the Tabula Mundi tarot. My little Thoth study group is probably going to gasp in horror and distress when they see this video. I don't know if I've warned them yet, but I don't think I'm keeping this deck. And the funny thing about the Tabula Mundi, let me just show you some cards. The funny thing about this deck, I mean, it's, look at the box it comes with, the beautiful like ribbon. Here's the thing about the Tabula Mundi. Check out the backs. They're a lot. The backs are a lot. This is a Thoth-based tarot deck by M.M. Moline, who I believe is absolutely brilliant. Now, M.M. Moline, along with T. Susan Chang, they have a podcast called Fortune's Wheelhouse. And in that podcast, they kind of go through every single card, not kind of, they definitely go through every single card in the Rider-Waite-Smith Tarot and compare it to the Thoth Tarot and talk through the symbology in every single card. This is one of M.M. Moline's Thoth-based decks that she has created, and it is so cool. There are a lot of really amazing things about this deck, including the fact that the astrology and the artwork, it all is woven together in this really smart way where, for example, the major arcana, let's say the Lust card, which is similar to the Strength card in the Rider-Waite-Smith Tarot. So here's the Lust card. Now this card is associated with the astrological sign of Leo. What you'll find in M.M. Moline's deck is any other card that has a Leo representation will have some element from the Lust card artistically. So some symbol that's on this card will also be on any other card in the deck that has Leo as part of its astrological association. That is so freaking cool, and she does that the whole way through the deck. It's really quite brilliant. However, and here's, no, I've got more to say. And here's the other thing about this, is that when I bought this deck, which I looked up was actually in I want to say it was 2019. It was a long time ago. I got this to study the Thoth Tarot. I told myself I didn't like the original Thoth Tarot and that this would make the Thoth more accessible to me. The colors are more bright and vivid. I felt like the art style was more my style. And in some ways, that's actually still true. And then when it came time, when I was like, okay, I'm finally ready to study the Thoth Tarot, I'm going to pull out my Tabula Mundi deck, and I'm going to study the Tabula Mundi, and I'm not even going to worry about the original Thoth. I told my friends this. I told many of my friends this. And then something happened. I really don't know exactly when it happened, but I was just beginning to dip into some of my reference books around Thoth and the book M, Liber Mundi, which is M.M. Moline's book. And I realized I don't want to study this, actually. I want to study the Thoth. And I was like, okay, well, maybe I'll just give the Thoth a try. That's kind of where I started. And by the way, in case you were wondering, this is going, maybe eventually. It's going to live in purgatory for a while because I don't want to be rash because this is out of print and I don't know how easy it'll be to replace. So I'm going to park it for quite a while probably before I try to find a new home, but it's probably not staying. Anyway, the deck that I love instead is the original Thoth. And I have 2 copies of the original Thoth, one of them being this one I have here. I have it in one of these pretty Peggy wraps. This is its permanent wrap. It used to live in another one temporarily, but this is its permanent home. The original Thoth, the large version, as I started to actually study this original Thoth, which it's currently in order, so I don't want to mess it up here, I started to discover that I actually really like this artwork because everything on here is on here for a reason. And once I realized that in my studying process, this deck grew on me in a major way. And I was like, well, it's so easy to understand. This sounds so counterintuitive. If you've ever looked at the Thoth and felt like really intimidated, you're going to be like, easy to understand? What are you talking about? But for me, compared to the Tabula Mundi, this one is just clearer and more clean, simpler, I guess. I don't know. I think M.M. Moline's deck is freaking beautiful and brilliant, but this feels now the most accessible to me. And I ended up just working with this deck and only this deck for my personal readings for like 2 months, and I just really bonded with it. And I realized if I want to go in with like a really intense, esoteric, astrological deck, it's going to be this one. Which was just such a crazy thing for me to realize. So yeah, I literally flipped from, I'm not going to study the OG Thoth, which is, you know, this original by Aleister Crowley and Frieda Harris. I'm not going to study this one. I'm going to study the Tabula Mundi. And then I literally changed, I switched camps. I switched sides. I don't even know why I think I know my own mind, because clearly I don't, or I didn't in that case. Anyways, my journey with Thoth has been really great. You're going to be hearing more from me about that, I'm quite sure, in the near future. But I just was shocked to discover that I preferred the original Thoth over the Tabula Mundi, which was the opposite of how I thought it was going to go. And I'm going to try to stop babbling about this, but it was a really big deal to me. So that brings me to the next deck that is not staying with me. And this one is no longer in my physical possession, so I can't even show it to you. It is the Star Spinner Tarot. Whew, okay. I will throw a picture up, but honestly, I'm just going to link in the cards up above my original walkthrough, which was not that long ago, of the Star Spinner Tarot. This was a giving into curiosity moment for me that I really shouldn't have given in to. I originally actually anti-hauled the Star Spinner Tarot, and then something happened. I got really curious. I saw somebody talking about it. I just impulsively was like, maybe I need to give it a chance. And I brought it home, and well, you'll see it all unfold for me in my walkthrough, but it just didn't connect the way that I wanted. After the walkthrough, I just kind of sat there looking at it like, I don't have any desire to get to know you. I don't have any desire to work with you. And it's not the fault of the deck so much as for me, it was the fault of not just feeling like there was too much jumbled upness in the deck. Like some of the cards seemed to be based on fairy tales and myths. Some of them may have been loosely inspired by myths, but I didn't know which ones. I didn't know how to connect it. Some cards, like cards in a suit, all seemed to be about the same myth. Some cards, there was like individual cards for a myth. It just felt a little bit chaotic in a way that wasn't landing. So that didn't work out for me, but it was so sweet and so cute. However, the thing from my own collection that I decided I love even more and that I feel like is a lot more readable for me personally is the adorable new Kawaii Tarot. This is with artwork by Lulu Mayo. This is just a charming little deck. This is what the backings look like. This is great. And this sort of fills my need for a sweet, charming, kawaii kind of deck, right? And I think I was hoping for some of that from Star Spinner. I also was really charmed with Star Spinner by the idea of having like different gendered couples for the lovers card. I thought that was really cool. They had all these different alternate lovers cards, but then I realized that I didn't see my relationship in any of them anyway. So even though I thought it was cool that it had that, it didn't really represent my life. And so in a way, it wasn't the few things I thought were going to be major selling points just turned out really not to be. But this deck is just charming. It's incredibly readable. I've already used it in a Unicorn Fam channel member live reading event, and I had a lot of fun playing with it in there. And it's just, this is so my aesthetic. This like cute, adorable, fat, cuddly animals. It's everything to me. So this is really great. And this definitely sort of eased the sting of the fact that the Star Spinner didn't work out. And I did get this deck and the Star Spinner at a kind of similar-ish time. So I kind of feel like it was just the natural thing from my collection that sort of fit the bill for me. All right. This next one, I was convinced that like how do I even begin? Readers and friends and people that I genuinely respect absolutely love this deck. And the creator actually sent this to me for the purposes of review. And I genuinely thought this was going to be my jam. I thought the aesthetic of it was really, really cool. Anyways, I should probably tell you what it is. I'm talking about the Coastal Curiosities deck, Oracle deck. There's a lot of things I love about this. It's beautiful cardstock. It's on a really nice like linen finish cardstock. It's a decent amount of cards. There's single keywords. And it's in this kind of vintagey style, which frankly, it's got this kind of found objects kind of vibe. And I should have known this wasn't going to be for me because as much as I want desperately to love vintage vibe things more than I do. But to date, there's only been a few things with a more vintage aesthetic that have actually landed for me. But I had high hopes for this. I thought the keywords were going to be great and expansive, and they are. The funny thing about this is that it is really, really expansive. A keyword like tender, you can do so much with that. And I know so many people who love this deck. And like, look at the color palette. Isn't that just like soothing to look at? Isn't that lovely? But it didn't connect. I was looking at it and something about the combination of the keywords and the artwork. These are the kinds of things that are so subjective. It just didn't work for me. And I was gutted because I was so excited I really thought I was going to love it. I really did. And then I got it and I was like, this isn't for me. Boo! So that one is going to be going off to find a new home. Now, one of the things that I loved, that I thought I was going to really bond with about the Coastal Curiosities Oracle, was the expansive keywords and the room to roam, like sort of intuitively. And I realized I do have something from my collection that does that very, very well. And it's my tried and true Eliminated Earth Oracle. This is a deck that is by, oh gosh, I forget the creator's name. This deck is by Claire Mack. It's been around a while. It doesn't get a lot of airtime on YouTube these days because of course we've moved on to brighter, shinier things, but this is still in a very solid place in my collection. The Eliminated Earth has this very grounded, earthy energy, and sometimes I forget that I have this to pair with so many things, and it does in a way have that sort of found things kind of energy, but found things in nature. So whereas I feel like the Coastal Curiosities had a lot more sort of man-made objects melding with nature in a way, the Illuminated Earth Oracle has this energy of just rawness of nature, rawness of the elements. It feels really grounded, and I feel like whenever I use this deck, no matter what I'm using it with or how I'm using it, I can use it like a tarot. The keywords are fantastic. This was one of my first very favorite expansive Oracle decks, and I edged it by hand in this like blue color to sort of match the backs, and you can tell how heavily I use it by the white marks down the center of the top and the bottom, because of course I riffle shuffle end to end, and so that's where my edging always wears the most. It has a really delightful shuffle, a really beautiful smooth matte cardstock. It's lovely. I can't imagine ever parting with it, but there are decks that I've said that about that I've later on parted with, but so far this one is very secure in my collection, and it definitely scratches the itch for the Coastal Curiosities Oracle. But none of these decks have broken my heart the way that this next one did, and it's going to break all of your hearts too. Those of you guys who know me and watch my channel are going to be shocked. I was shocked that this deck isn't working out for me, and it's brand new to me. The Lillifer Tarot. You guys, okay, I have so many feelings about this, but the most important, or the biggest feeling I have, is that if you know me, you know my channel, like this bag here, it actually has a stamp on it, or like a patch sewn onto it that says emotional baggage. This is one of my favorite decks of all time, and it's by the same creator. This is not the first time this has happened to me, by the way, and I think it's a really good lesson for me that sometimes it's Actually, most of the time it's not about the creator, it's about the deck, which is so sad. But I mean, the creator's part of the deck. It's not like I've separated them in my mind. It's more that just because I love one thing a creator that I deeply respect makes doesn't mean I'm going to jive with the other thing. But the deck I'm holding here is the Reclaim Oracle, which is an oracle deck. I'm not going to go into card by card because I don't want to distract from the video, but this is by Marion Costentin. It is brilliant, powerful, beautiful, everything to me. It is astounding for healing work, astounding for shadow work, mind-blowing in every possible way. There were things that I shouldn't have liked about this deck, like the fact that there's like two colors, black, well, one color, black and this fleshy pink color. This is not my aesthetic. It's not. And yet it stole my heart in such a major, major way. And it has pride of place in my collection. So when I found out that Marion was working on a tarot deck, when I found out that Marion was working on a tarot deck, I was over the moon. And then when I saw how colorful it was going to be, you guys, I counted the days. I was watching the mail, watching the emails, watching for any announcement that this was going to be on its way to me. And when it arrived, I stopped everything and I opened the tuck box and I looked at the first couple of cards and I went, oh no. I actually did, as some of you know, I actually make my walkthrough videos as part of my bonding process with a deck. And I sat down, I turned on the camera, I started to film the video, but I knew partway through the video this was not for me. And I was so sad. Do you ever just want a deck so badly? I can't open the tuck box either, that's a problem. Do you ever want so badly for something to, I'm going to use a really sharp knife, not to cut it. This is a little hack. This is going to look real scary. I'm going to do this on camera. You can do this with a letter opener. You don't need a sharp knife, but if you slide anything flat under the tuck box flap, you can very carefully and gently lift up the flap. That's what I just did. Anyway, you guys, I wanted to love this deck so bad. The cardstock is great. The size is great. This is the exact same size as the small Thoth Tarot. And from my understanding, this has Thoth influences. I don't know if that's really true. I went through it for myself side by side with my Thoth Tarot, and it just didn't land. I mean, the colors, though, this is so much more my aesthetic than the Reclaim was, and yet this is the one that I can't get along with. And it's not the fault of the creator. It's not the fault of the artwork. It's not anything. It's just one of those ones that I opened it and I knew. I was like, I'm not getting anything. It did not talk to me. It was like completely silent. And I wanted so badly to love it. I'm looking at it for me now. I'm not even sharing it with you. I'm sorry. I wanted so badly to love it. It's very symbol forward, which is great. It makes a lot of sense in a technical way. There's a lot of astrological and elemental symbols peppered throughout the deck. I freaking love the color. I love the sort of scrawly, sort of messy look to the characters. Jeez, I really genuinely am so attracted to it on a surface level. But it was like it was speaking a language that I couldn't understand. And I was so sad. I don't know how else to say it. This was one that I just assumed I was going to love. I just assumed. And it's something I've learned a couple of times the hard way, is that I can fangirl like crazy over somebody's art. I can think they are the most brilliant artist and they're super in touch with everything. I can resonate with them as a person. I can think their artwork is brilliant, and still, look at the little tuck box even says hello on it. I'm so sad that this did not work out. You don't know. Well, you probably do know because I won't shut up about it. But this was a bummer. This was a real, real bummer. And I think I actually already put it in the Supportive Tarot Facebook group on my trade list. And I think partly because I can't keep looking at it being sad that it didn't work out for me. And I hope I've been really enjoying actually Thea over at Garden Goddess Tarot. Oh my gosh, if I've just messed up your channel name, I'm so sorry, and I'll put it on the screen correctly, but I think that's it. Thea loves this deck, and watching her love this deck has actually been really, this is going to sound so ridiculous because it's just a deck of cards, honestly, but watching her love this deck has been so therapeutic for me. I have watched her video twice gushing about this deck because it makes me happy, because it means that it's definitely just one of those things where it's not meant for me, but it's meant for somebody else, and I think that's great. And it's kind of like, I know that it sounds silly because, again, it's just paper, but like knowing that people out there are loving it and connecting with it and bonding with it makes me feel better about the fact that I didn't. I want you to be loved, you know? I just want you to be loved. I just wish I could love you, but I don't. So that's my journey with the Lillifer Tarot. When I was trying to think about what for my collection kind of I do bond with and I do connect with that feels like it has a similar kind of energy, I realized I do have something that I'm super bonded to that has the same kind of feel, at least for me. What I imagined I was going to feel about the Lillifer, I feel about this deck, and it's the Luminous Void Tarot. This one is by Laura Zuspan. Zuspan? I don't know how you say that. And this is one of those decks that it's so unique and so spectacular and so special. It is an oval shaped deck. This is the shuffle edition. I used to have the bigger first edition, but that one is kind of unwieldy to use, and this one is a much more usable size. I can actually riffle shuffle this particular deck, and it's still quite meaty. Like, it's still quite a big, thick deck. This one connects me right to my intuition. The messy art style is exactly what I need to connect to the part of myself that needs that in order to kind of get past my sort of left-brained tendencies. And so this is really great for helping me connect to my intuition, connecting to emotion. It's a very watery deck. All of the things that I feel like I was kind of feeling from, and it's very colorful, all of the things I feel like I was kind of feeling from Lillifer, looking at it from a distance, I feel with the Luminous Void Tarot. And I realize I already have something in my collection that fills that need for me. And so while they may not look all that similar on the surface, the Luminous Void definitely scratches the itch, as you might say, as I say regularly, for the Lillifer Tarot. And so it makes me feel just a little bit better about my decision to, well, my realization that Lillifer doesn't work for me. So that is it for the decks that I am not keeping. Let's move on now to the mass market decks I'm not going to buy. So I've only picked here, again, the things that really strongly tempted me that I also didn't already buy. And there's two that I want to talk about today. So the first one I want to talk about is the Woodland Wardens deck. Oh my goodness, I was all in on this one. I was like, I'm just going to buy this. Like, I wasn't going to put it in a say yes to the deck video. I wasn't going to agonize. I was just going to buy it. I was going to buy it. And actually, I have Kelly over at The Truth and Story to both thank and blame for the fact that I realized I talked myself out of it as much as it's beautiful. And this is one, any of these I could see myself, except for the ones I'm not keeping. Any of the decks I decided not to buy or back. There's room for all of them, in all of them, for me to be tempted later. Although, if my experience with the Star Spinner is any indication, once I've anti-hauled it, I probably should stick to my guns. But in any case, the Woodland Wardens is beautiful. It has this almost tarot-esque feel. It's got this kind of aged storybook look to it where it almost looks like you're literally flipping through an aged storybook, like an old storybook. And the illustrative quality is something really spectacular and special, I think. I think it's gorgeous in every possible way. And I was ready. I was like, I think I'm going to get off the fence. I think I'm going to buy it. And I was watching, the reason I'm blaming this on Kelly's Truth and Story is because she did a live walkthrough of this deck, and I was there live watching the chat, kind of chatting with people. And throughout the video, I was just falling more and more in love with it, except I had two kind of issues that were popping up for me during. One was that I couldn't think of any animal deck in my collection I could pair it with, except for the Oak, Ash, and Thorn, which I didn't bring to share here. But it has a similar storybook kind of soft colors, vivid colors, but soft colors kind of vibe, that storybook kind of vibe. But I also know that the Oak, Ash, and Thorn Tarot is going to have its own oracle from the same illustrator and creator. So I don't want to get an oracle deck to pair with that deck because I know one is coming that's going to be a perfect match. So I'm like, well, I'm probably going to buy that one, so I shouldn't get the Woodland Wardens for that. And then I was trying to think if there was any other deck in my collection I could see using this with. And at the end of Kelly's video, she was talking to us and showing some possible pairings, and I realized there was nothing I could, in my collection, I could picture it next to. And part of the reason that is because my favorite animal decks, other than Oak, Ash, and Thorn, are all quite bright. And the colors are rich and full of depth, or they've got really a lot of bright white accents. And this sounds so superficial and silly, but it's true. My decks, the decks that I'm drawn to, have brighter colors. That's typically my aesthetic. There's some exceptions, but that's kind of usually the thing. So I decided I don't need the Woodland Wardens. And I have something in my collection now that already will suit the purpose of giving me something nature-based to pair next to my animal nature-based tarot decks that does have lots of vivid bright color. And that is, it's currently in a kind of, I don't know if this is its temporary bag home or its permanent bag home, but this is one of Peggy's large bags, and it's perfect for this deck. This is my massive I call it my super deck. But this is the illustrated herbiary, the illustrated crystallary, and the illustrated bestiary decks all combined. Now what I've done is I've edged each individual deck in a slightly different colorway. So the purple colors are the crystallary deck. The blue colors are the bestiary deck, as far as the edges go. And then the green colors are the herbiary deck. Now this one, as you can see from the cards you can see on the screen here, is incredibly bright and vivid. There's a lot of gem tones. It's got a lot more going on in the cards. It's a lot busier, which again is something that I tend to be drawn to. So with these decks at my disposal, I realized I don't need another sort of animal, plant, crystal, anything kind of oracle. Woodland Wardens is very much an animal deck. And actually I would say it's animals blended with plants. That seems to be its main theme from what I could tell. But I have this, and this is amazing. And I would love to have more reasons to pull this out, either individual decks or mixed up all together. But I have this, so I don't really need the Woodland Wardens. At least that's how I talked myself through that process. The next mass market deck I'm not going to buy is the oracle deck called Into the Lonely Woods. Oh my goodness. There are 2 oracle decks out on the market by 2 different publishers, both featuring this particular artist's work, and they are delightful. And I've really had some good success with oracle decks that Lucy Cavendish has authored. So this, in so many ways, is my aesthetic. And I agonized about this decision. I looked at walkthroughs of both decks. I waited until they were both out. I saw them in pre-order, waited until they were both out, watched individual walkthroughs, watched side-by-side comparison videos people had made, and I ultimately decided of the 2 by the same artist, I preferred Into the Lonely Woods. But when I tried to imagine where this would sort of fit in the way that I work with tarot and oracle decks, I realized I didn't have a place for it. It didn't slide into the kind of categories I typically reach for decks for. It didn't feel like it was a natural fit in my collection in any way. And that was kind of confirmed when I was preparing for this video and to talk about this deck, and realized I have nothing in my collection that scratches that itch. And I think it's because I don't have an itch here. As much as this deck is charming and adorable in so many ways, I just realized I appreciate that it exists. I think it's super sweet. I really enjoyed watching other people's walkthroughs, but there's nothing about it that speaks to me personally. It totally reminds me of the children's book Where the Wild Things Are, but there was nothing there for me. That's where I eventually landed with it, and I was like, oh, I guess I don't need it. But I didn't have anything in my own collection to compare to because, again, I realized I don't have an itch in this area to scratch. Does that make any sense? So, yeah, that is where I landed with Into the Lonely Woods. All right, so now it's time to talk about indie decks I'm not going to buy. Let's start out with the Embroidered Graveyard Oracle. Oh, okay. So I covered this deck in my hot takes video. I can't remember which one. And I kept an eye on it. I had an idea of how I would work with it. And I was really thinking about it. And it was kind of sitting on this spot on my wish list where it's like not at the very tippy top, but also one that I didn't want to forget about, you know, kind of in that spot. And then I started thinking about, would I practically use it the way that I imagined myself using it? And I'm actually, as I'm making this video, reminded of a video that Candy Soul and Soil made about her classic decks and how she kind of found herself, when she was trying to think of her classic tarot and oracle decks, she found herself sort of gaslighting herself, and she felt like it was her fantasy self that she saw that those were the classic decks, and she kind of had to talk to herself about it. If I'm making no sense, I'm so sorry. But I'll try to remember to link the video itself down below or put it up in the cards for you. But she kind of talked herself through and realized, well, those are the things I wish were my classic decks, but they're not yet, or they're not at all. And here's the ones that are my classic decks. And that's kind of what I think I did to myself a little with the Embroidered Graveyard Oracle, is I was like, this is, my fantasy self would do these like deep, dark mediumship readings, and this would be really cool for that. And I think the reality check I needed actually came from a video that Mixtress Ray did celebrating her channelversary. And she had a lot of things for her personally that did not work out with that deck. A lot of them including like some things in the guidebook that didn't resonate and some issues there. And just hearing somebody speak so frankly about their experience with the deck kind of had me asking myself what it was I really was drawn to, how I could see myself in my practice today actually working with it. And I realized I didn't see myself actually working with it. And it wasn't because somebody else didn't like it. It was because watching somebody think critically about the deck that she had it in her hands. watching her think critically about it and speak critically about it gave me that moment to ask myself, but is it something that I will use, that I will work with? Do I do mediumship readings? No, not currently. I have in the past. But when I do that kind of reading, I'll typically reach for something I'm already really, really closely bonded with. And actually, I thought about even showing something that sort of, again, scratches that itch for my collection in this section. And I realized there isn't anything because I don't have a single go-to deck for mediumship readings. There's a couple decks that I've happened into doing some mediumship style work with because the moment was right. I think it had less to do with the deck. So again, there's nothing in my collection that scratches the itch because again, I don't have an itch here. I think again, it's more of a fantasy self situation where my fantasy self does these deep, dark, shadowy mediumship readings. And I'm like, that's not what's in my practice right now. So maybe someday that will change. And it's not that that's the only way you can use that deck. It's just that that was the thing I was drawn to about the deck. So being honest with myself about all of that gave me a second to be like, okay, maybe you don't need this one. The next independent deck that I decided, I'm pretty sure, not to buy is the Hardy Tarot. Oh my gosh, I really want this one. And part of me kind of does because I've been geeking out so hard on the Thoth, and the Hardy Tarot is another Thoth-based deck. And I have this I'm part of this little friend group / study group for the Thoth right now. And it seems like everybody loves that deck. And so part of me is like, I want to love that deck. I want to love it. And I went and looked at it and I kind of do love it. But here's the thing about my experience studying Thoth, and I'll definitely be talking about this more, but for me, studying Thoth has been a really exciting because it adds a layer to my understanding of and appreciation of tarot. But it's gone into, or it's part of a melting pot for me of how I look at each individual card. As much as I'm excited about Thoth decks and Thoth-based decks, I don't see myself needing to have a whole lot of specifically Thoth-based decks. I thought I was going to, but I think I'm realizing I don't really need that. What I want is my original Thoth, and then I want to know how to weave that into reading with other decks that either have some slight Thoth influences or don't. And the Hardy Tarot feels like a deck that goes kind of all in on the Thoth, and there's nothing wrong with that, but that is otherwise not exciting to me. And this is the real kicker. On its own, separate from the fact that I found out it was a Thoth-based deck, it in and of itself was not exciting to me. Knowing that, I realized I don't need it because I have other decks that have Thoth influences that are exciting to me, one of which in my very own collection is also new to me, and it is the Ashura Tarot. Now this video I believe is going out before, I could be wrong, this might be going out just after my Ashura Tarot walkthrough or just before, I can't remember. It's possible it's just after, I can't recall right now. But the Ashura Tarot, now I bought this when it was first re-released, and Dustin at Modern Metaphysicae told me all about this deck. It's in this cute little mini pocket pouch from Peggy's shop that I love, that I stole when I was taking product photos for her. Anyway, this is what the backings look like. Now this came out in this poker size and I snapped it up. I said I wasn't going to, and then I did, because the more that I looked at it, the more I realized I liked it for its own sake. I think it's absolutely beautiful. I love the colors. I love the way that I can see the Thoth Tarot in here, but I don't see only the Thoth Tarot in here, which is something I learned when I've worked with it. Because, of course, I filmed my walkthrough of this deck, and then I worked with it for a full week before my video is going up even. So I've gotten to know this a little bit, and I find that I love it for itself. And in actuality, sometimes it feels almost a little Rider-Waite-Smith to me, but I can see the Thoth layer in it, which is exactly what I love. I love the colors. I love when I can see the colors from the Thoth in this deck, and I see the associations and I understand them. I love that the astrological associations are on these cards so that I can reference those, because that's become really meaningful because of my Thoth study. There's a lot I love about this deck. And then, of course, after I bought this, she came out with the tarot-sized version, and I was like, oh no. But I realized I probably would have bought it in the tarot size, but I probably am not going to purchase a second copy because this is actually kind of cool, and it's beautiful linen cardstock, by the way. I'll have a link to everything I'm talking about, obviously, in the description box down below, but bottom line, I have this beautiful Thoth-based tarot that is not Thoth, that really, really excites me, that's been really fun to work with, and that sort of works with the Thoth the way that I work with the Thoth currently, which is as part of this sort of soup of knowledge about tarot that I like to take sips from. And sometimes, you know, you take a sip and you get a little more of like the celery and I'm suddenly into chicken soup, by the way. Sometimes you take a sip and you get a little chicken and a little celery, and then sometimes you take a sip and you get a little, you know, carrot and potato, and it's, yeah, it all kind of has a similar flavor, but you can pick out individual ingredients. This is kind of what I do with tarot. I pick up a bit of knowledge from working with this deck or working with that system, and it all goes into the soup pot. And depending on the reading and the context and the art and the deck and like what I'm feeling intuitively in that moment, I'll pull out or pick out different flavors and work with those. And this Asherah Tarot, I feel like really represents that energy. It represents that sort of melting pot that I feel like is what's happening for me with my tarot studies and my Thoth studies as they integrate with my other tarot studies and like tarot knowledge. So it's kind of, it works. It works with the way that I'm learning and working with the Thoth. That was a lot. I had a lot to say about the Asherah. I'm probably going to have even more to say in my show and tell at the end of the month. But I've really enjoyed this deck. I feel like it's like my favorite sort of Thothy deck that I have bought since beginning to study the Thoth, other than the original Thoth. That's a lot of times to say Thoth in that sentence. This is perfect for me. So I don't need the Hardy. As much as part of me is like, buy all the Thoth things. Now that I understand the system, it's like I want all the Thoth things. But that's not necessarily practical in my collection or with how I actually intend to read with my new-ish Thoth knowledge. So, okay, that's a lot of Thoth talk. Let's move on. The next independent deck that I'm not going to buy, probably, pretty sure, is the Pastel Unicorn Tarot. I blame Kimberly Sam. Kim told me about this deck personally, which was mean. And I want it, but there's not even a really big but. It's really cute. It's pastel, it's pinky, it's girly. It's got that kind of like, well, girly to me. It's not actually girly, but it's got that kawaii kind of feel. But like, how many adorable unicorn decks do I need? All of them. All of them, Lisa. Are you deluding yourself right now? Are you going to buy this deck anyway? Probably. If there's one deck on this entire list today that I'm very likely to cave on at some point, it might be this one. Maybe. We'll see. But for now, I've talked myself out of it, and that is the important thing. For now, I have given myself a good talking to and told myself that I don't need it. Now, I've already shown the Kawaii Tarot, which also has adorable unicorns in it, so we know that that's in my collection. But the other deck that I felt like kind of scratches the itch is my OG Crystal Unicorn Tarot, which is adorable. This is by Pamela Chen. Now, on the surface, I feel like this deck is a little on the shallow side. And I don't say that to be negative. I say it just because it's very much on the surface level to me. This is like a really cute Rider-Waite-Smith clone with unicorns instead of people. And I like the colors. I love the backings. I like that the unicorns are super cute. It's not trying to take itself too seriously. Can you do serious readings with this? Absolutely. It's exactly like a Rider-Waite-Smith deck to me. Provided that the person you're reading for is able to take it seriously, right? Of course, that's obviously a caveat. But I have this really cute, sweet, rainbowy unicorn deck in my collection. So do I actually need another one? No. Do I want another one? Of course I do. But also, if I brought home everything, and this is something that I try to remember, you guys can see, these are just my Oracle decks behind me. I have 3 racks behind me here. These are all Oracle. I have my favorites rack over here out of camera, tarot. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 other racks, just like these, filled with decks. Those are all tarot. So if I were to bring home every single deck that I like, that I want, y'all, it would be out of control. This is one of the reasons why, and for me, I want to say this correctly, because I think sometimes people conflate what feels good to one person with what should be the case for everybody. It's not the case. For me, when these racks start getting super, super full and I have no more space, it suddenly feels overwhelming and I suddenly feel like I can't keep track of what I have. I can't appreciate what I have. And that's the sort of thing that has me being so careful about being mindful. I do bring things in and I do send them back out. And there are certainly decks I have for a reason, a season, or a lifetime. So I have a rotating collection. That's fine with me, but I don't want to just say yes to myself about everything, or again, things just start to pile up and it gets a little overwhelming. So I said no to myself about the Pastel Unicorn Tarot, but I really didn't want to. But it does make sense given what I have and what I use and what I reach for. All right, that brings us to decks I'm not going to pre-order. Now, this category has been getting increasingly difficult to discuss because I cover a lot of these in my hot takes video series, and I do a hot takes video every single month, and I do these anti-hauls every couple of months or so. So I went back and looked at the decks that are in pre-order status that I haven't yet covered in hot takes, actually. things that are further forward, because by the time I do my hot takes, I kind of have formed my opinions about stuff. And one thing I've discovered is that I very rarely pre-order things now. I do back things on Kickstarter, which is a type of pre-ordering, kind of. Um, but I almost never pre-order a mass market deck because I'd rather just wait till it's out, make sure there's no quality issues, and then pick it up. Um, there's no rush to me with a mass market to pre-order it. It's not like they're not going to have enough copies usually. Sometimes I end up having to wait a little longer because I didn't pre-order, and if the demand's especially high, maybe things are backed up. But like for the most part, mass market decks I don't tend to pre-order. So this is kind of cheating. But there are two decks coming out way later that I do want to discuss that I've decided I definitely don't want to pre-order. So the first of these I want to talk about is the Trick or Treat Tarot. This is a Barbara Moore deck, and I can't remember the artist name, so sorry, but Barbara Moore is working on it, so I'm sure she's writing the guidebook. Barbara Moore is somebody whose guidebook writing style I genuinely love and appreciate, and pretty much will give almost anything Barbara Moore does a chance, at least in my head. Even if I don't buy it, I will definitely consider it because I think that she's got a really good mind for tarot, and I enjoy reading what she says about tarot. So there's that. And it's a Halloween themed deck, which is super cute. So the Trick or Treat Tarot looks to me to be very like kitschy Halloween themed. It's a Llewellyn deck. It's probably going to have a beautiful color guidebook that's going to smell fantastic. I don't care how shallow that sounds. That's a thing. I really kind of want it, but I'm determined to wait because I did recently decide to rehome my Halloween Tarot in a Tin, which is by Kipling West, and that's also kind of a kitschy Halloween themed deck. Partly because there are a lot of decks I like to work with during the sort of month of October, during Halloween season, so to speak. And they all are jockeying for position. It's one of my favorite divination months of the year. Probably my favorite divination month of the year, if I'm being honest. And so I want everything I work with to be like top of the list for me. Like things I'm super excited to work with that feel really thematically appropriate for the time of year, that give me the kind of readings I want to give at that time of year or do at that time of year. So I'm definitely needing to take my time and keep an eye on this one to see if it's one that's going to work for me or not. So I'm holding off. But just in case I decide not to buy it even when it does come out, I do have a deck in my collection that has a bit of that sort of kitschy Halloween vibe. And it is this one. This is the Halloween Oracle by Stacey DeMarco. This is a little is this a Blue Angel deck? Yes, it is. I wonder if it's going to come out in the matte cardstock. If you guys have this and it comes out in matte, let me know. I don't know if I'll rebuy this one. It doesn't have a ton of cards. It's kind of thinnish. I trimmed the borders off of mine and edged it in orange and black, and I think it came out really cute. The backings are freaking adorable, and they really worked well for trimming because, of course, they just have this repeating pattern of all these like little bats and ghosts and pumpkins and cute things. So adorable. In any case, I find this to be a really usable deck, but it still has that Halloween kitsch, right? That like sort of fun Halloween theme. The cards here often relate directly to the season, which is wonderful. And so I feel like if I'm craving a little bit of that Halloween mood, I can reach for this one. But because it's specific to Halloween, even just in name and the way that I've edged it, I don't reach for it except during Halloween month. So Halloween month is now October, just so you know. So yeah, I don't reach for it as often. And because these are the kind of decks that only get out to play like once a year, I definitely want to be very careful what I bring in that fits in this category because I don't want a whole lot of stuff that just hangs on my rack and only comes out to play once a year. So I'm waiting to see, but I'm real curious and I'm going to be real excited to watch some walkthroughs on the Halloween Tarot. The other one I decided not to pre-order, this one's also in mass market, is Buffy the Vampire Slayer Tarot. Now, I'm going to be real honest with you guys, and I have been before. I have not been impressed by a single one of the pop culture decks that have been coming out by Inside Editions. They all feel kind of rushed. They all feel kind of money grabby. That's my feeling so far. Just my personal opinion. I've never brought a single one of them home, I don't think. No. But I've considered many of them. There was a Disney Villains one I considered. There's a Disney Alice in Wonderland coming out that I've considered. But every single time I've watched a video, most of the people reviewing these decks seem at least mildly disappointed by the way that the characters are married with the cards and the way that most of the numbered minor arcana cards tend to be pippish in the decks that are put out by Inside Editions. They have a fun pop culture vibe, but that's the beginning and end of the depth for a lot of the people I've seen review these decks. And so My impression, based on watching those videos and on what I've seen of all of the decks, really, that have been coming out by Inside Editions, is that they're meant to be pop culture, fun, frivolous kind of decks. And I have so many decks, I don't need something that's just going to be pop culture frivolous. However, Buffy the Vampire Slayer is one of my comfy blanket kind of shows. When I have gone through especially challenging, difficult personal times, I have watched Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Season 1 all the way through to the end. It's something that I can't imagine not wanting to see in person. But I know someone out there is going to buy it, and I can watch the walkthrough. Because I'm not very optimistic that it's going to be done well, which is concerning because I love this fandom so much. If it's cute, if it's done well, even if it's pippish, if the pips are thoughtful, if the major arcana is paired well with the characters, if the court cards are paired well with the characters, I will probably enjoy using it. But so far, that hasn't seemed to be the case with the other fandom decks that have been coming out by Inside Editions. So I'm very dubious, but also kind of excited. So there's that. I'll keep you guys posted, but right now, that's where I sit. And now it's time to talk about Kickstarters that I didn't back. So we're going to start with the racy one, which is the Eros, or Eros, I don't know how you say that, tarot. I'll put a picture up for you. Of the campaign. Nothing racy on the picture. Sorry. I actually, of all of these sort of erotic, sort of sexuality, eroticism themed tarot decks I've seen over the years, this is the first one that I would say seemed to have the most depth and to be the least gratuitous, although it gets very graphic from what I could see of the cards. But it intrigued me because it just felt like it was so much better done, so much more well done than other decks in this sort of niche. I've always kind of wanted a really nice, sexy deck to use, but as a queer, femme-identified person, it's fine, I can roll with some heterosexuality in my decks, it's totally cool, but for some reason when it came to this type of deck, I wanted it to feel more diverse in the type of partnerships that are pictured, that sort of thing. I didn't think there was ever going to be a deck that would work for me, but this one really, really tempted me. I ended up deciding not to get it because I was pretty sure that when push came to shove, no matter how much better it is than the things that have come before, I realized it probably wasn't going to work for me. And then I stumbled on this delightful deck, which is currently in a really adorable panty bag. It's going to get a different bag at some point. I have one in mind. But then again, it might just stay in this because I love this bag for it. Maybe it'll have rotating bags, or maybe someday I'll have another sexy deck. Okay, this is not the point. I'm off to the races here. This is a mass market deck. It's super affordable. The cardstock quality is like normal mass market, inexpensive type thing. You're not going to get anything super like luxurious here, but it comes with a great little guidebook. It's a great deck. This is the Erotic Tarot Intimate Intuition. You can get this on like Amazon. It's fantastic. It's diverse. It is a pip deck. But you see drag queens. Oh, let me put it in front of my face. There we go. You see drag queens in this deck. There's a pride parade in the chariot. But then the pips are like candles for the wands, feathers for the swords. What else do we have? Oh, shells for the cups, and pentacles are what? Oh, roses are the pentacle suit. So they work elementally. There's a lot of really sexy scenes in this deck, and they go into places like, kink, polyamory, they've got different races depicted. They have different types of pairings, or more than two pictured, and it's racy without being incredibly graphic. It's a sexy deck. It's a sex-themed deck. You're going to see naughty images for sure, but you're going to see different power dynamics. You're going to see different types of connections, and I just think that's really, really cool and different. I feel like what I get out of working with this deck is I feel like it aligns with, I don't know, my life experiences a little bit better than, wow, this is just going some places, but like, I just feel like this feels more inclusive. And because it feels more inclusive, I feel like it's not just a bunch of like male female couples doing their thing. Like it goes like, look, there's even like an older couple on a date. And I just feel like it's very respectfully done, in spite of the fact that there are some sexy, racy images in here. Don't get me wrong. I also think that because it's pips through the minors, it's not so much there's not so much, like if you lay out 10 cards, you're going to get 3 or 4 out of 10 on average, right? That are going to have images, maybe a few more. But the rest are going to be these like really lovely, tasteful little pips, right? And it's fine. And because I do enjoy working with pip decks on occasion, I just think this is very tastefully done. It's not overly racy. It's not just being gratuitous. It works. And I love it. That is the Erotic Tarot Intimate Intuition. And this has definitely scratched the itch for any decks like this. I can't imagine needing another one. Like, it's so specific. I don't read for clients on these topics, at least not yet. But having this for myself and for when I want to get into that sort of mindset with tarot, having that as an option is really cool. So I'm excited I have it. So yeah, the next Kickstarter I decided not to back. And this one I did cover in my hot takes recently. So if you want to hear my more fleshed out thoughts on this one, go there for all of that. But it is the Mindscapes Tarot. It was actually in my hot takes from March, not from April. So if you're curious, go check the March one. The Mindscapes Tarot is gorgeous, and I'm a little bit heartbroken. I was following the creator. I'm on their email list. I'd been following him for a long, long time, watching some of this art develop. It's been a long time in the making. It came out. It's just as beautiful as I knew it was going to be, but it's majors only. I think I told myself when I was on his mailing list that I was going to buy it anyways. But I don't work with majors only decks. Maybe someday I will, and then this one would be a really beautiful addition. But also I felt like the price was very high for a majors only deck. I know why. I think I know why. And that is because it is a majors only deck that comes with a beautiful art book. The art is the focus, not the tarot deck, in my opinion, in this case. And so with that being the case, the art book is a major highlight of what you back on Kickstarter. But I don't need an art book, and I want a full 78 card deck. And if this creator ever does make one, I'll probably be first in line to buy it. But I found the price point, especially to ship to Canada and all that stuff, for a majors only deck just didn't make sense for me. So I held off. But I do have a deck that has a gorgeous art quality to it that I love, that I look forward to using, that I feel like I can really move into, like really travel into when I'm using it. And that is the Majestic Earth Tarot by J.D. Hildegard Hinkle. This deck is stunning. It is currently out of print. I'm so sorry, but it is beautiful. And it's made up entirely of landscape art. And it is breathtaking. It's not transformative. It's transportive. It takes you right into these places. And there's something so spectacular about it. It's almost photographic, but these are all paintings. These are all pieces of landscape paintings. And it is gorgeous, and I love it. And because I have this, I don't feel like I need Mindscapes as much as Mindscapes is also beautiful landscapes, beautiful nature. I've got this, and this is, look at this Ace of Water. This deck is gorgeous. So I feel like this definitely scratches the itch for me for the Mindscapes Tarot. Now on the flip side, if you're somebody who has been ogling the Majestic Earth Tarot and you want something with this vibe and you're okay with working with a majors only deck, then Mindscapes may be exactly the thing you've been looking for, particularly since this deck, when it goes up on like eBay and stuff, because it's out of print, it goes for crazy high prices. So it could be a really good scratch the itch deck for you to get Mindscapes, whereas for me, I already have something like that, so I don't need Mindscapes. I have to at least do a brief shout out to Maxwell's Rainbow Tarot. This is the most darling thing I have seen, and it seems so counterintuitive that I didn't back it, but I also knew I wouldn't likely use it because I have another deck that has this vibe for me. What's so special about Maxwell's Rainbow Tarot is that it's created artistically by a child, which is incredible. I think that's amazing. This Kickstarter funded successfully. I can't wait to hear about it when people get it and they start showing it on their channel and that sort of thing. But it would have been wasted in my collection. It would have been a dust collector, and that's not helping anybody. I'm so glad that the project funded, though. I have in my collection, to fit the bill for this kind of energy, my Playful Heart Tarot, which, while it was made by an adult, I would argue that Zara Kitten Chops, who created this deck, is very much in touch with her inner child and brought all of that energy to the forefront when she made this deck. And so this fits all of the bill. Fits all of the bill? Does that even make sense? It fits the bill for me. It scratches the itch. It's got that almost as if you could imagine that this was created by a child. You can feel the inner child energy just come rushing through this deck, and it's full of depth. And I use this. This is my go-to for inner child work. It's not the only one I use, but it is a go-to. And because I have this, I really wasn't all that tempted by Maxwell's deck, although it is darling, and I'm so excited that a deck came out that was actually made by a child. I think that's super fun. It's super cute. I just don't think I would have used it, so it would have been wasted on me. This last one, the last one of this video today, Shadows of Light Oracle. Now, in my April hot takes, I gushed and oohed and awed, so tempted, sat with it for a bit. I decided not to get it, not to back it. Now, I may still purchase it at some point when it's out in the market, assuming that it funds properly. I think it did. I think it was already funded. But assuming that it hits market and there's extra copies, I may reconsider at that point. But I don't want to Kickstarter it because as much as this feels like the exact kind of thing I've been hungering for lately, just depth, Oracle deck with a lot more meat and substance to it. I do have a couple of Oracle decks on their way to me right now that I backed on a previous Kickstarter. The Wisdom of the Shadow and the Wisdom of the Divine Feminine, I backed them in a bundle. Both of those Oracle decks are winging their way to me, I'm quite sure, right now, and I should have them any day. Those I'm going to be able to really sink my teeth into. And I realized when I was looking back again at the Shadows of Light Oracle that the energy reminded me, although the art doesn't, but the energy reminded me a lot of my Oracle of Echoes by Anaturian. It has the same kind of like depth and substance. Anaturian's deck, to me, is like, it's a classic. It has wonderful keywords, art that doesn't shy away from the shadow. It feels really useful in a bunch of different situations. It feels like you can pair it with tarot and it holds its own. It doesn't just like fizzle out next to a tarot deck. You can do a tarot style reading with this deck. It's comprehensive and balanced enough, in my opinion, to stand on its own 2 feet, which I think is really great. The Oracle of Echoes I've had for a long time. This is actually the 2nd edition. I upgraded, I guess, from the 1st edition. The 2nd edition has a few more cards and has a different backing. I did like the first backing so much, but I mean, can't argue with the bag match, so there's that. But in any case, I love the Oracle of Echoes, and I realized I don't need to be so impulsive about Shadows of Light Oracle because I do have other meaty Oracle decks I can sink my teeth into in the meantime. I can wait and see the Shadows of Light come out, get some perspective, again, maybe watch walkthroughs, maybe revisit it. I think if I'm scanning through the list of the decks that I covered today, the ones that I'm the most likely to consider in the future, they'd probably be the Shadows of Light Oracle, possibly Buffy the Vampire Slayer, but that's a real iffy if. It's just my favorite fandom, or one of. The Pastel Unicorn Tarot. I think those 3 that are most likely to tempt me later. Super curious to hear your guys' thoughts on all of the decks I talked about not buying. If you have pre-ordered, bought, backed, or anything, any of these decks, or you love them, please do share your love of them down below. Or if you had a similar feelings to me, you can share that too. But let's continue the conversation in the comments. I think it's always really helpful when we can bounce these things off of one another and kind of get a feeling for what works for us, what doesn't work for us. It's really easy, I think, in this sort of YouTube world, if you consume a lot of content about something you're interested in, like tarot, it can be really easy to get caught up in the frenzy of just wanting to want everything everybody else wants, or like everything everybody else wants. And I've been doing this a long time, and I still sometimes get drawn into that, like, oh, a good friend of mine really loves this deck, so I must love it too. And I've learned so many times that's not the case. So this practice, the practice of anti-hauling, the practice of doing my hot takes, my this or that declutters, all of the mindful content I do is so that I will slow down and ask myself, will this work for me though? Like, it's great. I can love that somebody else loves it. I can appreciate that somebody else, this is totally their jam. But I need to ask myself, at least I feel like I need to ask myself, is this working for me? Will this work for me? Because it's so easy to get caught up in the tide of excitement about something, particularly new things as they come out. It's like there's so much buzz and excitement, and almost that becomes the thing that I think sometimes we're caught up in, not even the thing itself that we're maybe interested in. It's like the Buffy the Vampire Slayer tarot. It's like, if a whole lot of people were excited about that deck, I would have a harder time saying no to it, just because that excitement would be infectious. And I think that's something to be aware of when you're consuming content on social media, is making sure you're checking in with yourself. Like, does this feel good to me? Does this feel like something that I would be able to use that would fit with the other things that I have to use? When it comes to something like tarot, which we use as a spiritual tool, many of us, not all of us, use it as a spiritual tool or a predictive tool or a personal growth tool, however you use the tarot. And some of us just collect, by the way, and that's also completely valid and fine. But if you're like me and you use the tarot, then you may want to have these conversations with yourself. And if every single time you ask yourself, will I use this? Does this work for me? If the answer is yes every single time, that's totally fine. But I'm a huge advocate for just asking yourself the question before jumping on the buy button. And I do not succeed at this every single time, even a little bit. Like, if not for creating this content and talking to you guys and kind of in a way being accountable to everybody who watches my videos about my practice, maybe I would be even more impulsive. And I have my impulsive moments, aka the Star Tarot that I mentioned at the beginning of this video. So know that that's normal and it's okay. But if it feels better to you to be mindful, if it feels better to you to curate your collection or your library or your stash of tarot and oracle decks, if that feels good to you, then this process hopefully helps you to step into that space where you can be more present and mindful about what you're bringing in. And that's one of the reasons I love making these videos. So if you enjoyed this, if you found value in it, please do smash the thumbs up down below, the like button. Please subscribe if you want to see more content like this from me. And don't forget to click the notification bell as well. Thank you all so much for spending time with me as I went through all of these decks. Thank you for being here and for putting your eyeballs here on this space. It really, truly means so much. Thank you again, and may your magic always shine from the inside out. Bye, guys.